Welcome, my friends, to Inside the Minds of Authors. I'm DC Gomez, and I'm thrilled you're joining me today for a fun conversation with a passionate author. We're kicking off the program, like it's our tradition, with a short reading from the feature book. I hope you guys enjoy it. Let's get started.
Hi, I'm John Miles, and I'm the author of Passion Struck 12 Powerful Principles to Unlock Your Potential and Ignite Your Most Intentional Life. And I am so thrilled that over the past week, Passion Struck hit #1 on Amazon in both the business and investing category and the spirituality category. And we won 2 Stevie Awards for Best Business Book and Best Ebook. So I am now going to dive into the logic that's behind this book. So as I was coming up with the idea for the book, I had studied over 750 different leaders from all walks of life for over 7 years. And I found a myriad of things that they did in common, but they really boiled down to 12 principles that I kept seeing again and again. And so I spent 2.5 years after that 7 years of research, really doing me search on myself, applying these principles in my own life. And through this, I came up with something that I call the Passion Struck model. And that's what the book is based upon. So Passion Struck is divided into 3 sections that allow the readers to build on materials that are discussed in previous chapters. There's an order to these stages, and some can occur concurrently, but underneath them is an overall process. It's important for people who are listening this to understand that Passion Struck is a comprehensive approach for personal growth built upon the synergistic interplay between mindset shifts, behavior shifts, and the action-oriented psychology of progress that I also call deliberate action. When mindset, deliberate action, and behavior are driven by intrinsic motivation, fueled by passion, perseverance, and intentionality, and were imbued with a sense of mattering, they produce what I call a passion-struck life. So to go over this, the 4 pillars of the passion-struck model, first are mindset shifts. In part 1 of the book, Mindset Shifts, How the Self-Realizer Needs to Think, I discuss the building blocks of how passion-struck luminaries create an intentional mindset. This is the first step in our journey towards transformation because it begins with reshaping our mindset, which is a step illuminated by the Stoic virtue of wisdom. This passion-driven wisdom paves the way for new actions, which establishes a foundation for significant change. It profoundly influences and molds our beliefs and values, clarifying our why and influencing how we approach challenges and opportunities. This fundamental shift in perspective, deeply rooted in passion, is crucial for setting the stage for subsequent stages and shifts in behavior and deliberate action. So I break down the mindset shifts into the following 6 steps. The mission angler is the first step, which is mustering the power to do something great. The brand reinventor is the next principle, which is never being afraid to reinvent yourself. It's followed by the mosquito auditor, which is avoiding the most dangerous animal on the planet. The next principle after that is the fear confronter, which is realizing you are your biggest competitor. Then there's the perspective harnesser, which is learning how to zoom out and tap into its power. And finally, the last principle in that section is the action creator. Permit yourself to dream your dream. In section 2, behavior shifts, how the self-realizer needs to take action, I discuss how behavior changes are so important for those desiring to become passion-struck. Once our mindset has been recalibrated, our next logical progression is a shift in behavior where the role of perseverance becomes crucial. Our behavior, which is the what, is a direct reflection on our mindset, dictating how we act in the pursuit of our goals. The integration of perseverance into this behavior shift is fundamental in making our transformed mindset actionable. And that's the key thing here, making it actionable. It's through this perseverance that the principles of self mastery are actualized, guaranteeing that our actions are not only consistent, but are aligned with our aspirations and our values. So, when it comes to fueling your passion, I explain why it's a snowball effect. The more consistent, coordinated action a person takes towards their goal, the more fuel they create towards their passion. Thus, here is a drive for results, especially for those who make the vital commitment to their journey. And I distill these behavior shifts into the following 6 areas. Anxiety optimizer. This is how you find how to be on edge without going off the edge. Originality embracer, which is realizing originality necessitates adaptability. Boundary magnifier, which is understanding that sometimes being right means being alone. Outward inspirer is where you learn how to speak and act with your feet. Gardener leader is where I teach you how to practice eyes on, hands off leadership. And then lastly, conscious engager is where I teach you how to keep the main thing in your life. And then in section 3, the psychology of progress, I discuss how to unleash the passion struck framework. And action, as I mentioned before, is so important because it plays a vital nonlinear role in the intertwined processes of reshaping our mindset and behaviors, acting both as a driver and as an outcome of those transformations. And through repetition, actions evolve into habits. And when we seamlessly integrate those habits into our behavior, our brain's neural pathways adapt, making these actions more automatic. And when you include in this process consistent feedback, the positive outcomes are reinforced into positive behaviors and the negative ones prompt you to reassess them. So the blend of the boldness and intention in our action is where we apply the when and where to act, aligning our actions with our goals. And then lastly, in the model, intrinsic motivation acts as the cohesive glue linking mindset, behavior, and the psychology of progress. This internal fuel drives our journey to live a life that's filled with passion and purpose, moving beyond the need for external validation and developing a deep sense of mattering in each one of us. So, in the beginning of the book, I discuss Angela Duckworth's book, Grit, and I use that as a foundation for the rest of my book. But in her book, she describes grit as the combination of passion and perseverance. However, I add another quadrant, you could say, to the triangle of intentionality. And those 3 things coming together are what I believe propels us to live a self realized life. And so, underneath this all are the 4 Stoic virtues of wisdom, justice, temperaments, and courage, which I've reimagined and updated, and they each plug into a specific part of the model. So that's a little bit about how I created the book and how its chapter by chapter flows.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Inside the Minds of Authors. I am excited you guys are joining us today. We're going to have an amazing conversation, so I hope you guys can't wait. If you're new to the podcast, go ahead and subscribe. You do not want to miss a single episode. We have amazing authors every week with incredible books, so we can't wait to get started. Hello, Mr. John. How are you?
Man, I'm doing fine. It's a great Saturday to be with you. It's actually a cold front here in St. Petersburg, Florida. So I am so relieved and can't wait to take on the rest of the day with a little bit cooler temperatures, which are a surprise.
Whew, that sounds amazing. So, congratulations on the new book, the award, hitting Amazon charts, all incredible things. How are you feeling?
Man, it's been a whirlwind of a week. I have to tell you that. So it's been a long time coming, but so unexpected and humbling. And I'm just glad that the book is getting recognition. So very excited.
10 years of working on this book and putting it together and tons of research.
I always ask authors because I need to know what made you decide to tackle on this project because this is huge.
Well, I felt like I always wanted to write a book, but throughout most of my career, I recognized that I was a writer, but I was more of what I would say a business writer, meaning the background of my journey is I was a officer in the Navy, went to the Naval Academy, and then became kind of a career business executive with senior roles in Fortune 50 companies. And then I was the CEO for a few companies. And what I realized about my writing is that I was always passionate about it, but I was doing writing in the form of creating proposals or board documents or PowerPoint presentations like a lot of us do. And so I never inherently thought that I was really a creative writer. And I formed a company called Ovesto a number of years ago once I got done with my last CEO role. And it was really one of the first companies that was doing fractional executive integration or consulting services for companies. And I happened to get a gig with a company called Bold Business, which the owner of the company used to own Chief Executive Magazine. And he had started a new publication called Bold Business. And we launched another one while I was there called Project Bold Life. And it was being exposed to both of those. And Project Bold Life is more about personal development. Bold Business is really supposed to encompass kind of what like Chief Executive did, but on a broader basis. He put me in the position of assistant publisher. And then at one point, I became editor in chief, and I ended up writing about 150 blog posts for the different periodicals. And through that, I really realized that I had this passion for writing. And this was probably 3 to 4 years into my research. And coming out of that, I started this segment while I was there called the Bold Leader Spotlight, where every single week we were highlighting a different bold leader. And some of these were military people, some of them were well-known figures like Satya Nadella, and this thing just started taking off. Before I knew it, we're getting 15,000, 25,000 downloads on our videos and articles. And I saw that there was something here because the Bold Leader Spotlights really talked about 8 principles that we saw from a leadership perspective. So it got me thinking, if those 8 leadership perspectives are true, there's got to be a commonality of principles and how they live their life too. And so that's where kind of the idea was born that really what these people are doing is they are so passionate about pursuing the solution to a problem that they found that they're willing to kind of risk their reputation, they're willing to risk their finances. And that's where this whole idea of passion struck came about. What I was really trying to do then is to teach people how do you live a passion struck life. But before I put this in the world, I wanted to make sure that this stuff actually worked. So that's why I spent a couple of years testing it on myself. So long story, but that's kind of the background on the book.
I love the background. I love the fact that you tested this on yourself. Did you see results immediately, or were you going, really? Does it actually work? How did that work out for you?
Well, I think like anyone, there are some areas where I think you learn things more quickly than others. So one thing I found, and it's the second principle I talked about, is a brand reinventor. And I found that one I picked up quicker because I've always been this person who's kind of seeking out new knowledge. And so just in the course of how I operated, I was already reinventing myself because I was constantly trying to keep up with what was happening in the business world and in the greater digital landscape. So that one was easier. I think a more difficult one for me was the first principle, which is I talk about this thing called self discrepancy theory. And this is where we really have 3 versions of ourself. We have who we are, and then we have our ought self and our ideal self. And some of us end up living our life as what we think we should be, which is our ought self, what society dictates to us, what our parents have trained in our minds. And what happens is we create this big gap between where we find ourselves, and this is where a lot of us find ourselves stuck, versus this ideal version of ourselves that we desire to become. And I turns out I'm not alone. The research on this is pretty startling. Thomas Gilovich, who's a psychologist at Cornell University, has done years and years of research on this, surveying people who are in their third trimester about what is their biggest regret in life. And it turns out a whopping 76% of them have the same regret, and that's not pursuing becoming their ideal self. And the reason why is it's hard. So, what I found is I had to reorient my life. And so I did this through the analogy that I found myself living my life on a stool. And if you think about a stool in your kitchen, the supports underneath you are kind of what define your life because your life is made up by where you're spending your money and where you're investing your time. And I found that my stool was way overweighted on one area, and that was the constant grind. And so I envisioned a new life that had pillars of mental health, physical health, emotional health, spiritual health, relationship health. And I decided that that was the way I wanted to live my life going forward. And then it becomes how do you start taking action on that? So, what I encourage people to do, and it's not a short term process, it's a long term process, is you've kind of got to find an area that's holding you back the most. And for me, it was really dealing with PTSD and getting the help that I needed for stuck points that were holding me back in life. And I found that the more I did the hard work on that, it actually started opening up other areas of progression on my life. And then everything started to flow better.
I'm so impressed and blown away. You have done so much research and then you committed to doing it on yourself. Because sometimes I think as leaders, it's easier to look how to help others than it is to look at ourselves. Like we're always trying to catch up with everything and do 500 things. So I appreciate it and I commend you. You also have the best phrase that I love all the time is where you spend your time and your money is really what you care about. And sometimes nobody wants to see that. So that mirror in front of people becomes kind of tricky because nobody wants to pay attention to that. So congratulations on the work.
Well, thank you so much. I think for those who are spiritual, I mean, those teachings go all the way back to the Bible that where people invest their life, which is typically where they're putting their wallet towards things or their time, their calendar, is amounts to what becomes most important to them. And oftentimes it's those things that are in our subconscious that we're spending our time on. And so the reason intentionality is so important in my work is because you have to be really intentional about the moments that make up your day because it's those micro choices that end up leading you either to a tsunami of greatness or a waterfall of despise. And so that's why every moment counts and you have to start reorienting your mind to how you want to function.
You started the book talking about mindset and looking at all those things in a very specific and design structure. And you talked about intentional. Everything in this book is intentional. Nothing's going to happen by chance, which is absolutely like amazing. But it translates to anybody. It's not just a business book. It's just not as spiritual. Anybody can pick up this book and say, oh my God, I can get better in anything in my life. So I appreciate it.
Well, sometimes people who are in businesses come to me and they're almost afraid to give the book to people in the organizations because they're like, you're trying to get them to quit our company and to live this life somewhere else. And I'm like, no, you're missing the whole point. We have almost 85% of all workers disengaged, if you believe Gallup. I mean, to put that otherwise, they measured the 1.2 billion full time workers in the world, 900 million of them they found disengaged. Why are these employees so disengaged? It's because we look at them so myopically at work. I mean, I remember I'm guilty of it as well. When I had a direct report, even sometimes you see them in the role that they're currently in, and you forget about all their accomplishments that they've done before that. And I think the other mistake we do is we treat people at work just in work and we don't look at the whole person. So, what I'm really trying to say with this book is if you focus on the whole person and you make the whole person whole and you really focus on their growth in and outside of work to become the best person that they can be, they're going to be a better human overall and they're going to be a much better individual contributor or leader in your organization. And To me, it's similar to the way that Pete Carroll coached the Seattle Seahawks. And I was talking to Mike Gervais, who's a sports psychologist, the other day, who spent 10 years working with Pete on this. But when a football player came into the Seahawks organization, the first thing that they started doing was they wanted to teach that individual how they become successful as a human. And the more that they taught them life skills and how to view themselves as a whole person, the more they contributed to benefit the wholeness of the team. And that's what I'm trying to teach here is yes, there's an element of this where I think the business world is shifting. And as a result of that, more and more of us are going to have to become what I'm calling individual entrepreneurs because the digital transformation that's occurring in AI is causing employers to displace so many of their employees. So there is that benefit for people that they take control of their own life. But there's also a core message here for businesses that you've got to allow your people to create passion struck lives. And in doing so, they become more passionate to your mission, your customers, and your success. And to me, the two go hand in hand. And that is how I think you cure a lot of the disengagement that's out there because if you want a passionate workforce, it starts with internal passion.
I think you're talking about something so radical yet simple because for years we have taught in the workforce that the person's private lives were private and don't talk to them about them, let them have their own stuff outside of work. But now we're looking at how those private lives are affecting their inside and their like workforce and how things are not just isolated little cycles, just kind of moving along. So I'm loving this conversation. I can see why managements are terrified because now we're asking them to shift. Like it's a drastic shift that they have never had to do in order to get engaged employee across the organization. So awesome.
Well, I mean, it's a big shift and it's a little bit threatening because a lot of times leaders tend to treat all their employees the same way. And one thing that I'm really advocating in this Gardner leadership model is that the same way that you cater to different plants in a gardener leader has to cater to different people in their organizations by understanding who they are. And that's why I am such a huge proponent of tests like the Enneagram, where when you know your style and you know the style of the employees who work for you, not everyone has the same motivation. Not everyone has the same goals. So you really have to mirror your messages individually to the people who work for you. And I think what we lose sight of is, oftentimes we'll hear that a person has a child on the way, etc. And we celebrate that. But how many people really talk to their employees about what is their life plan? What are their hopes? Are they trying to buy a new car? Are they interested in buying a house? Is the family situation in their life? What do they want to do from a volunteering perspective? How can you make their work life cohesive with their outside life so that the two become intertwined more? And it takes effort. It takes being courageous, and it also takes being humble. But I think if people would start doing this, it would so drastically change the environments and it would change how employees feel about their leaders, feel about their companies, but more importantly, how they feel that they exist within the companies and how their success there is actually propelling them outside of work as well.
It makes them feel part of something bigger, not just I'm a little block in this giant wheel that nobody's paying attention to me. As a person who's been in the workforce and understands sometimes how easy it is to feel not appreciated or noticed, this book tends to revolutionize the way of thinking. And most people probably not ready, but we definitely need it. So congratulations, Mr. John. I'm loving it. So,
Thank you.
question that I ask all my authors: what advice would you give an up and coming business leader who's thinking about writing a book? What would you tell them?
Yeah. Well, one thing we haven't talked about is I also am a podcast host like you. I host something called the Passion Struck podcast, and I've about to hit 500 episodes. So during that process, I've been interviewed a ton of great people, and I'll just take a couple highlights from this. One of them was Bernie Marcus, who was the founder of Home Depot, and Bernie talked to me really about the need for hard work in fulfilling the vision that you create. He said that they had this vision for what they thought Home Depot could be. But if you look at the initial team that worked on it and the hundreds of hours per week that they were putting into it, it wouldn't have been anything without the hard work. And I know that is kind of cliche. We need to do hard work. But I think you've got to approach the work smartly because doing activities for activity's sake really is pointless. It's really being strategic about where you're putting your energy. And that's what he was talking about to me was that they were trying to build a culture in the Home Depot because they knew it was that culture that was going to drive employees wanting to be there and to service their customers. So it was hard work in establishing the culture. And then another good one was Dave Liniger, and Dave founded Remax. And one of the things I liked about Dave's approach was that for the majority of his career as the CEO and chairman, he spent it on the road. And the reason he did that is the same thing that I heard from my president and chief operating officer at Lowe's. The cash register doesn't ring at headquarters, it rings in the store. The same thing with real estate agents. You make your money by the agents who are out in the field. So if he wasn't motivating them by being out in the field, if he wasn't out there understanding what was happening, understanding how the processes that they were putting in place and how they were building the structure for the individual organizations in the field, he couldn't properly, sitting back at headquarters, articulate a strategy and fulfill it that met the needs of the people who were out there. So those are just a couple examples.
Ooh, I'm so amazed how well you take all this knowledge and just like distill it down to people so they can understand it and get it in this bite size. Because sometimes I think we forget that the best way to communicate is so everybody can understand. So I love it. Mr. John, tell us, where can our listeners learn more about you? Where they can learn more about the book? What is your website? Tell us.
Yeah, the best two places to find everything about me are my website, my personal one, which is John, middle initial R, Miles.com. And if you want to learn more about the book, the podcast, the business, and our consulting services, then you can go to passionstruck, STRUCK.com.
Mr. John, I can talk to you forever. You have some of my favorite topics. I'm going, okay, I need to get this book because I'm so excited. But before you leave us, are you ready for the lightning round?
Sure, let's do it.
Easy peasy. Don't think too hard on these. Let's see. Cold drinks are hot.
Man, I love my coffee. I mean, I look so forward to my first cup of coffee in the morning.
We're
So
going
I
with
would
hot.
say hot.
City or country?
Earlier in my life, I would say city. The older I get, the more I like space. So I would say country.
Okay. Action films or drama?
Definitely action.
Ebooks or print?
Man, I'm still a person who loves to hold the actual book in my hand, and I can see looking at your wall behind you, you agree.
Absolutely. I am a print kind of person. Here's a little different. If your life had a theme song, what would it be?
Boy, that's an interesting one. I'm thinking of the Incubus song where he's talking about that wish you were here. Basically, this compelling journey that I'm trying to live, as he describes, as being on a roller coaster with the safety belt off, trying to live my life as courageously as I can.
Oh, that is definitely perfect for you. Absolutely. Mr. John, truly a pleasure. Congratulations. Do you have any closing remarks for us?
I think the biggest thing I would like to just tell the audience is every day when you look in the mirror, I want you to remember two different things. The first thing is the most incredible person that you will ever meet in your entire life is the person staring back at you. The second thing is the biggest critic that that person will ever meet in their life is the person staring back at you. And the biggest challenge we have in life is winning the battle against ourselves. Because if we do, we were all made so uniquely to solve a problem that only we can solve. And I think when we do that, that's when our lives really feel like they're going the best for us. But when we're doing things against it, when we're getting in our own way, when we become our own visionary arsonist, that's when we struggle in life. And so this all comes down to the power of choice. And so I will just end this with, what are you going to choose today?
That is powerful. Ow. Thank you, Mr. John. To our listeners, go ahead, pick up this book, check out the website, get yourself fired up to live your best life possible. Mr. John has an amazing book. Check it out. And remember, if you're new to the podcast, join us. We'll be back next week with another amazing author. Awesome. Thank you, Mr. John.
Thank you so
Congratulations.
much. Thank you so much.